This video is a compilation of lore entries for every enemy featured in the retail build of Turok 2. Entries for enemies cut from the game will not be featured here. Instead, video cards will be used to link to shorts containing information about cut content related to Turok 2. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment.
Though physically trapped within his lightship, the Primogen scoured the lost land for centuries with the power of his mind, searching for those that would serve him. Through the ages, the Primogen touched the minds of millions, tirelessly searching for those with the necessary strength of body and weakness of mind to suit his purpose. Those that were deemed unworthy woke from uneasy sleep with a terrible feeling of dread that they could not explain. Though the Primogen took great steps to ensure that his mental explorations would not be noticed by venturing only into the deepest recesses of the mind, he ultimately failed. The result was an entire world plagued by nightmares of a growing evil and memories of a mysterious and deadly presence that were as faint as the touch of a single invisible thread. What the Primogen had failed to predict was that as a result of his mental tampering, millions were able to feel the presence of those that had embraced his dark calling. For these multitudes, a common nightmare began to manifest itself, the result of the Primogen's subversive invasions into the collective unconscious of the lost land. Ghostly images of powerful beings bathed in the dark glow of a greater, more sinister presence haunted the peoples of the lost land like an evil breeze bearing portents of death. Despite the nearly imperceptible nature of these troubling experiences, there was an absolute certainty amongst the peoples of the lost land that these were more than mere visions, and that the fate of the world would one day lie in the balance. In their visions, people had felt the dark embrace of the Primogen. Most had rejected its dark hypnosis, but many had not. Of those that were drawn into the deadly web, a handful had especially pleased the Primogen by virtue of their single-mindedness, clarity of purpose, and outright ferocity. These beings, though their identities were a mystery, came to be known in legend as the Seeds of Evil, a deadly collective whose rise to power would herald the doom of all existence. All seeds, the legend tells, must fall from a single tree. The Dinosaur troops were a vicious and relentless collective, warriors born of claw, scale, and fire, locked in an age-old conflict with both the Lazarus Concordance and the legendary line of Turok. For countless generations, these hyper-evolved dinosaur beings sought to reclaim the world they believed was stolen from them, aiming to reshape it in their own image. No longer simple beasts of instinct, the dinosaurs were a civilization of cold-blooded tacticians and savage brutes, driven by an insatiable hunger for dominance. Their ambitions grew even darker when they allied themselves with the Primogen, an ancient cosmic entity trapped in the depths of the lost land. In return for their allegiance, the Primogen granted the dinosaurs devastating weaponry and forbidden arcane knowledge. Empowered by this unholy pact, the Dinosaur legions became terrifying instruments of death, capable of striking with terrifying precision, their attacks guided by bloodlust. Their numbers swelled, their power deepened, and their cruelty knew no bounds. Under the Primogen's influence, the dinosaurs abandoned all restraint, growing into a nightmarish force that swept across the lost land like a storm of bone and fire. They hunted without mercy, silenced entire villages, and crushed any hope that stood against them. The Raptoids were the savage descendants of the ancient Velociraptor, bred for speed, agility, and ruthless violence. These sleek and predatory creatures formed the backbone of the Dinosaur army, their every movement a blur of lethal precision. With their razor-sharp instincts and unparalleled swiftness, they strike with a ferocity that chilled the blood, leaving no room for mercy or hesitation. Gifted with bioenhancements by the Primogen, the Raptoid soldiers were more than mere animals. They were a deadly fusion of natural predator and engineered perfection. Their enhanced musculature and reflexes allowed them to leap vast distances, closing the gap between hunter and prey in the blink of an eye. Armed with enormous steel gauntlets, they could carve through flesh and bone with terrifying ease, capable of cleaving a human in two with a single brutal swipe. Their unrelenting aggression, combined with their superhuman strength and speed, made them a nightmare on the battlefield. With every attack, they embodied the relentless will of the Prima Gen, carrying out his will with savage joy and bloodlust. Millions of years of evolution had given rise to the entrails, a fearsome and brutal lineage descended from the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex. Towering, powerfully built bipeds, the entrails were a force to be reckoned with, driven by an insatiable thirst for battle and an utter disregard for mercy. They were the elite of the Dinosaurid army, massive in size and strength. Their colossal frames were more than capable of tearing their enemies apart, limb from limb, in mere moments. Under the influence of the Prima Gen, the entrail soldiers were further enhanced, wielding ion gauntlets that discharged devastating energy blasts and carrying deadly plasma grenades capable of obliterating anything in their path. In close combat, they relied on the raw, brutal power inherited from their bloodthirsty ancestor, the Tyrannosaurus rex, whose predatory instincts still ran deep in their veins. Each entrail warrior was a living weapon, a perfect embodiment of primal fury, and when unleashed upon their foes, they became an unstoppable force of destruction. With every strike, they carried the legacy of Earth's long-forgotten prehistoric past into the present, turning the tide of battle with their sheer, overwhelming might. The Fireborn were a strange and formidable dinosaur species, renowned for their unique ability to resist injury from flames. Born from centuries of genetic manipulation and dark magical experimentation, this rare resistance allowed them to pursue their enemies through fire and lava without suffering harm. Legends whispered that the blood of the Fireborn ran as hot as the very core of Earth itself. To this day, it was said that their footsteps alone could ignite entire forests, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. These specialized Dinosaurid soldiers typically made their homes deep within the labyrinthine cave systems that riddle the lost land, though the true purpose behind their subterranean dwellings remained a mystery. Were they guarding something, or were they merely biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike? No one could say for certain. Whatever their motives, the Fireborn were a living embodiment of destructive power, an ever-present reminder that in the lost land, danger could lurk in even the most unexpected forms. Throwbacks were a distinctive group of dinosaurs whose evolution had been stunted or deliberately manipulated by dinosaur technology. Created as both beasts of burden and instruments of terror, the throwbacks became a fearsome addition to the Dinosaurid war machine. These creatures were bred with a singular purpose in mind: to be relentless, single-minded, and utterly fearless. When they set their sights on prey, they attacked without hesitation, and their ferocity knew no bounds. They would not stop their assault until either they had perished or their victims lay slain, leaving behind nothing but destruction in their wake. Their savage nature made them ideal shock troops, sowing fear and chaos wherever they were unleashed. Scientifically known as Compsognathus, these small but vicious creatures were genetically enhanced by the Dinosaurid war machine to be far swifter and deadlier than their distant ancestors. Deployed in ravenous packs, they would tear through anything in their path with terrifying speed, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Unlike other throwback dinosaurs, however, once a pack of these compies began feasting, they would not stop until they had consumed their fill or were forcibly disturbed. Their insatiable hunger and relentless nature made them formidable, and they were often used as the first wave in attacks, overwhelming enemies with their sheer numbers and ferocity. Once set loose, they were nearly impossible to control, their bloodlust unstoppable until they were either sated or driven away. Brutally savage and completely fearless, The raptors of the Dinosaur army were bred to be larger, faster, and far more dangerous than their primitive ancestors. Their forearms were bio-enhanced, becoming longer and significantly stronger, allowing them to overpower anything in their path. The hind legs were also augmented, growing more powerful and prominent, with the added strength to launch devastating leaping attacks. The bioengineered heads of these raptors had been intentionally modified, with the flesh pulled back to expose much of the skull beneath, and their glowing red eyes pulsed with a malevolent, predatory intent. This terrifying appearance alone struck fear into the hearts of their prey, as they were relentless in pursuit, showing no mercy once a target was locked. Their sheer brutality and bloodlust made them one of the most feared creations of the Dinosaurid war machine. Although not originally part of the Dinosaurid army, the Leapers were vicious reptilian creatures that typically dwelled deep within the cave systems of the Lost Land. Small, nimble, and relentlessly bloodthirsty, these creatures moved through the terrain with uncanny ease. Their swift diagonal jumps made them nearly impossible to track, even for the most experienced of hunters. When encountered in the wild, their agility was a deadly advantage. Under the control of the Dinosaurid army, Leapers were often released alongside other throwback Dinosaurid creatures to raid unsuspecting settlements. Their swift, unpredictable attacks created chaos and confusion, allowing the more powerful Dinosaurid forces to easily overwhelm and slaughter their enemies. The Leapers' role in battle was to sow discord, softening up their prey for the deadly forces that followed in their wake. Deadside, the realm of the dead. In this forsaken domain, the laws of nature held no sway, and the energy of the living could be felt by the dead from miles away. This grim place served as the final resting ground for souls that had departed from the world of the living. Few were even aware of its existence. While the concepts of heaven and hell offered a semblance of comfort to some, Deadside was the harsh, unrelenting reality that awaited those who passed. An endless, desolate existence in a cold and terrifying world. It offered no peace, only an eternity of uncertainty. No living soul had ever entered Deadside and returned. The realm did not judge or distinguish between the good and the evil, the pious or the wicked. In Deadside, all souls were equal in their eternal fate. It was a great, oppressive melting pot of the dead, where morality had no place and nothing mattered beyond the endless void. Through the Primer Gen's dark manipulation of the fragile fabric of the Netherscape, the residents of Deadside found a way to puncture the world of the living through soul gates. Enticed by the false promise of resurrection, the malevolent spirits that resided in this decayed land would stop at nothing to annihilate the Turok lineage and seize the world of the living for themselves. The dead men, the fodder of Deadside, were far more than mere rotting corpses. Despite their gruesome state of decay, they were alarmingly dangerous, capable of flinging blood tainted with infestation at their prey. This blood had the sinister ability to paralyze any living creature unfortunate enough to find themselves trapped in the nightmarish realm of Deadside. The dead men had a disturbing resilience. Even after being struck down by gunfire, they would rise again, relentless in their pursuit. Their stubbornness made them seemingly impossible to kill. Even when blasted apart by explosives, the dead men would persist in their wretched state, dragging their shattered upper bodies across the floor in search of the one thing they hungered for: life force. These abominations, a twisted mockery of life, would stop at nothing to feed their insatiable, eternal craving. Held together more by arcane powers than the bonds of flesh, the Lords of the Dead were among the most terrifying and dangerous inhabitants of Deadside. These horrific beings had lost much of their physical form to decay and the ravages of time, leaving behind little more than a heavily armored skull and an upper body reduced to a grotesque amalgamation of bones, remnants of decayed flesh, and infested blood. All of it was bound together by a shimmering mass of arcane energy, pulsing with an eerie glow that radiated an unnatural, otherworldly power. The Lords of the Dead wielded massive bone blades with terrifying precision, and their command over dark magic allowed them to conjure fire projectiles that could burn away the very life force of the living. They were relentless in their pursuit of souls, an embodiment of death's cold, unyielding nature. The Sisters of Despair were creatures of pure malevolent intent, capable of summoning the dead men of Deadside with a single arcane incantation. Their mastery of magic allowed them to attack from a distance with a variety of devastating spells, raining destruction upon their enemies. In close combat, they were shielded by a powerful protective spell that could knock opponents off their feet with a mere gesture. These dark sorceresses performed ancient and forbidden rituals, using their twisted powers to dominate and control the evil masses of Deadside. Once human in a past life, the sisters were now horrific beings whose lower bodies had been severed at the ribs, leaving only a twisted spinal cord trailing behind them like a grotesque, obscene tail. They moved with unnatural grace, gliding through the air as if propelled by their dark magic, spreading despair and suffering wherever they went. The Purlin, a dull-witted race of ape-like creatures, dwelled in the treacherous death marshes. In the past, through their alliance with the nefarious Campaigner, the Purlin had learned the art of organization, strategy, and, most importantly, how to wield advanced, high-tech weaponry. With the Campaigner gone, they had managed to forge a crude form of civilization, with the mightiest Purlin warriors ruling over their less powerful kin. Under the Primogen's influence, the Purlin pledged their allegiance to his cause, believing they would gain access to even deadlier weapons and enhancements. Little did they know, the Primogen had no intention of honoring this pact. His true plan was to eventually eradicate the Purlin once the Turok had fallen, for he understood all too well that these creatures, despite their newfound capabilities, were treacherous and unreliable, tools to be discarded once their usefulness had expired. The war clubs, the backbone of the Purlin forces, were rarely armed with anything more than their raw strength, yet they were still a formidable threat. Thanks to the enhancements bestowed upon them by the Primogen, the war clubs had become far more agile than anything the Campaigner had ever managed to create. Their reflexes were lightning fast, and their ability to leap great distances made them terrifying opponents. Even without the enhancements from the Campaigner or the Primogen, the war clubs were capable of hurling massive boulders and other heavy objects at their enemies with astonishing speed and accuracy, turning the very landscape into a weapon in the blink of an eye. Minor intelligence augmentations, granted by the Primogen, gave rise to the Purlin Gunners, a specialized class of Purlin who served primarily as sentries at outposts and foot soldiers on the battlefield. However, their true preference was to engage their enemies from a distance, much like snipers. Armed with enormous rock-throwing Gatling guns, the gunners carried a large basket on their backs, filled with hundreds of smooth rocks the size of baseballs. With a single hand, they operated the weapon's crank, launching projectiles at their foes with deadly accuracy. But the crude and rudimentary construction of these weapons often caused them to jam, leaving the gunners vulnerable and helpless as they struggled to fix the malfunctioning devices, a critical weakness in the heat of battle. The elite warriors of the Purlin war machine, the Juggernauts, stood apart from the war clubs in both appearance and sheer might. Proud of their status as the pinnacle of evolution, the Juggernauts looked down on the war clubs, considering them nothing more than inferior creatures. While in service to the Primogen's cause, the Juggernauts were granted far deadlier armament than anything they could have forged themselves. Clad in high-tech armor designed by the Primogen, they were virtually impervious to massive blows and explosions. Their immense cleavers, once simple tools of destruction, were now enhanced to cleave through multiple enemies with a single strike. Additionally, Each cleaver was fitted with a powerful blaster at its grip, providing the juggernauts with the ability to strike from a distance before closing in for the kill. These towering warriors embodied the Prima Gen's vision of power, unstoppable and lethal in every way. Swamp wasps, massive and aggressive insects, thrived near the crude settlements of the Perlin, fiercely defending their territory from any intruder, regardless of their affiliation. These relentless creatures were known to even turn on their own kind at times, attacking fellow members of the hive without hesitation. Typically, they built their nests high above the ground, perched on the branches of dead trees, or clinging to the moss-covered walls of the treacherous swamps that filled the lost land. When danger approached, the swamp wasps would spring into action. Once they sensed any disturbance, they would swarm out of their nests, hovering near their homes and waiting for the intruder to reveal themselves. As soon as a target was identified, they would strike with precision, using their deadly stingers to deliver a venomous blow. Though a single sting might not prove fatal at first, a swarm of these relentless attackers could bring a swift, agonizing death to anyone unfortunate enough to fall into their grasp. The swamp wasps were a symbol of the untamed and lethal nature that dominated the lost land, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in the wild. Born and raised in a wealthy family, Damon Baird grew up with a love for machines. Building and tinkering with them were among the only happy memories he had of his childhood. In school, he achieved perfect scores on every exam and even invented gadgets while waiting for the rest of the class to catch up with him on assignments. Baird originally wanted to attend engineering school, but his parents refused to grant him his inheritance unless he enlisted in the military. 1 month after Emergence Day, shortly after joining the military, Baird met Augustus Cole after a fight broke out between him and 2 other Gears. Despite their clashing personalities, Baird and Cole quickly became friends following this unexpected encounter.
Wait. We're not doing Gears of War just yet, woman.
I don't care. I love Baird. He's kind of like you, but better.
Is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke?
I plead the 67.
God, not you.
Ha! Got him. The Blind Ones were the ancestors of the terrifying Cyclopean race known as the Flesh Eaters. They dwelled deep beneath the surface of the lost land, hiding in a vast labyrinth of tunnels and caverns that concealed an energy totem, a relic from the Lazarus Concordance built long ago. Centuries spent in total darkness, away from sunlight, had caused them to lose their eyes completely, leaving only hollow pits in their faces where eyes once were. Though they were blind, the Blind Ones had developed extraordinary abilities to compensate. An acute sense of smell, sharp enough to track their prey from miles away, and an exceptional sense of hearing. It was rumored that they could even hear the blood coursing through the veins of a living being. Driven by a ravenous hunger for warm flesh, the Blind Ones would occasionally venture to the surface under the cover of night, accompanied by their giant cave spider pets. From hidden trapdoors, they would spring forth, dragging unsuspecting victims to their deaths in the darkened depths below. However, they were careful to avoid sunlight at all costs, for the centuries spent in shadow had left them severely allergic to it. Exposure to the sun was fatal, burning their flesh like acid. Lacking the ability to forge fine weapons and armor like their more advanced cousins, the Flesh Eaters, the Blind Ones relied on scavenging. They would raid the bodies of slain victims or dig beneath ancient burial sites to recover the discarded tools and armaments of past civilizations. The strongest among them wielded the finest of these salvaged weapons and armor. Though they have little desire for power or conquest, the Dinosaur army has managed to convince the Blind Ones to help them by promising them an endless supply of soft, warm human victims as a reward for destroying the energy totem. Ignorant of the Dinosaur's habit of betraying their allies, the salivating Blind Ones eagerly agreed to find and destroy the energy totem. The Blind One Sentinels were the lowest rank among their kind, a primitive and brutal class of warriors. Lacking the refinement of their flesh-eater cousins, they crafted crude armor from the bones of slain animals, turtle shells, and scraps of stone, tar, and metal they scavenged from the world above. Armed with massive, unwieldy axes, the Sentinels relied on their primitive bone armor for protection, fashioning it as best they could from the remains of the creatures they hunted. Despite their lack of strength and sophistication compared to their kin, the Sentinels were relentless and unafraid. Their heightened senses made them formidable in battle, allowing them to quickly detect any threat and strike without hesitation. Though the weakest of the Blind Ones, they fought fiercely, charging into battle without thought of retreat, driven by an almost mindless ferocity. Blind One Guardians towered over the Sentinels. Their imposing size and stocky builds made them formidable opponents. Despite their bulk, the Guardians were surprisingly fast and deadly, capable of swift movements that belied their size. Armed with an unusual crossbow-like device that extended along the length of their arm, the Guardians could launch enormous bolts with incredible precision. These odd weapons reloaded automatically, allowing the Guardians to maintain a relentless assault on their enemies without pause. Thanks to their heightened senses, they could pinpoint their targets from remarkable distances, their accuracy honed to perfection. With each shot, the Guardians proved their terrifying skill, their crossbows firing deadly bolts with an eerie ease, making them some of the most feared warriors among the Blind Ones. The giant cave spiders, often kept as terrifying pets by the Blind Ones, were creatures of pure nightmare. Hatchling spiders, about the size of a fully grown pig or chicken, would swarm their prey in swarms, attacking with venomous bites from their small yet deadly fangs. While their individual bites lacked potency, their numbers more than made up for it, overwhelming their victims with vicious speed and ferocity. Fully grown cave spiders, however, were a far greater threat. Towering over their smaller kin, these adult spiders were about the size of a horse and exuded an aura of primal danger. They could strike with deadly bites, but they also had the terrifying ability to spit venom, targeting their victims from a distance. These larger spiders were not only deadly in close combat, but their venomous projectiles made them formidable opponents at range, capable of incapacitating their prey long before they got within striking distance. With their fierce aggression and monstrous size, the giant cave spiders were a constant source of fear and intimidation for anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. Distant cousins of the subterranean worms, which roamed the inhospitable lava fields of the Lost Land, the cave worms thrived deep beneath the surface, lying in ambush, waiting for any hapless prey to wander by. Even the Blind Ones were not immune to these relentless subterranean predators. Over centuries, the cave worms had evolved to seamlessly blend with the cavernous, dark surroundings of their domain, making them nearly invisible to all who ventured too close. The only sign of their presence above ground was a tongue-like tendril, which darted from the earth with terrifying speed. This tendril could snare an unsuspecting victim in the blink of an eye, dragging them down into the depths where the creature awaited its next meal. Silent and deadly, the cave worms lurked in the shadows, their massive, writhing bodies ready to strike at any moment. Their patience and precision made them some of the most dangerous predators lurking below the surface of the Lost Land. Distant cousins of the Lost Land's subterraneans, the lava worms, also known as fireworms, were small, leech-like creatures that thrived within the cave systems inhabited by the Blind Ones. Despite their fiery name, these creatures did not originate from molten lava. Instead, they were nurtured near the magma chambers, where they were cared for by the Blind One Guardians. This unusual symbiotic relationship allowed the Guardians to summon these worms from great distances, using them as lethal sentinels. Whenever an intruder ventured too close, the Guardians could call upon the lava worms to strike with deadly precision, attacking anyone who crossed their path. The worms' ability to sense the presence of enemies in the surrounding area made them an essential part of the Blind One's defenses. These creatures, small yet menacing, became a fearsome extension of their keeper's watchful gaze, ever ready to strike down those who dared to trespass into their dark domain. Strange, imp-like creatures, the Nahlas were cyclopean beings that lurked within the vast, twisting cave systems where the Blind Ones made their home. These bizarre creatures possessed disproportionate limbs, with their massive arms functioning as legs, while their actual legs had become vestigial, a remnant of the creatures they had once evolved from. The Nahlas traveled in small packs of 3 or 4, hunting together with chilling efficiency. They possessed the ability to hurl acidic projectiles at their prey, causing painful wounds that incapacitated their victims. Once their prey succumbed to the acid's effects, the Nahlas would descend upon them, feasting on the helpless creature with ravenous hunger. Highly territorial, the Nahlas could sense intruders from an impressive distance, their keen senses alert to any sign of trespass. However, they were not mindless aggressors. They did not attack other cave-dwelling creatures unless provoked. They were, in their own way, cautious and calculating, only striking when necessary to protect their territory or secure a meal. Their unnerving chatter and swift movements made them a dangerous presence in the dark depths of the Lost Land. Maggot-like worms that infested the dark chambers of the creature known as the Blind Horror, the skimmers formed a twisted symbiotic relationship with their monstrous host, dwelling deep within the territory of the Blind Ones. These vile creatures were an ever-present, silent threat lurking in the shadows, awaiting any signs of life. With their long, needle-like tongues, the skimmers would swarm any living being that ventured too close. Once they had incapacitated their victim, the worms began the slow, agonizing process of digestion. Their feasting not only nourished themselves, but also fed and sustained the Blind Horror, the monstrous creature that inhabited the massive, unsettling chamber where the skimmers thrived. Residing deep within the heart of the Blind One's dominion, the Blind Horror was a massive, grotesque beast, native to the cavernous depths it called home. This nightmarish creature defied any logical biological understanding, its very existence a blasphemy against nature. The Blind Horror's living chamber was a grotesque, cavernous sinkhole, resembling the twisted interior of a stomach. An acid pit surrounded a patch of strange, moss-like growth, which may have once been part of the creature's own insides. From within this horrific chamber, small tendrils, acid-spewing nozzles, and massive muscular tentacles extended through holes in the walls, crushing and digesting any unfortunate beings that wandered too close. Above, on the ceiling, a massive eye stared down with an unsettling intelligence, watching its domain with quiet, unnerving awareness. The creature's relationship with the Blind Ones is shrouded in mystery, but it was whispered that, at some point in the distant past, the Blind Horror may have been revered as a deity, its terrifying form worshipped by those who dwelled in the dark caves. Whether it was a god or merely an ancient predator, its fearsome presence in the depths of Blind One territory casted a shadow over the entire region, marking it as a place of absolute terror and strange, unknowable rituals. The mantids were a highly intelligent insectoid species hailing from a distant galaxy, forcefully torn from their homeworld and cast into the hostile and untamed wilderness of the Lost Land. Within their collective society, the concept of individuality was non-existent. They harbored no pity, remorse, or kindness. Their sole purpose was to further the survival and expansion of their species. Fiercely structured and utterly fearless, the mantids proved to be formidable adversaries, with each type possessing specialized offensive and defensive capabilities. These terrifying insectoid creatures formed an alliance with the Prime Agen, lured by the promise of new worlds to infest once he was freed from his ancient prison. However, their lofty ambitions were shattered when their colony, as well as their queen, were annihilated by the Turok known as the Coyote Knight, leaving only a handful of survivors to witness the fall of their civilization. After the Prima Gen's defeat, the Mantids' once proud society was no more. Without a queen to sustain their lineage, the Mantid species faded into extinction. Their colossal hive, a once bustling testament to their existence, now stands as a desolate monument to their lost glory. Though not directly linked to the Mantid hive mind, the mites were small insect parasites that had been permitted to inhabit the Mantid hive as a necessary cleaning force. Their sole purpose was to maintain the hive's cleanliness, ridding it of unwanted parasites, rodents, and other unsanitary creatures. By doing so, they helped ensure the hive remained sterile, an ideal environment for the nurturing of mantid embryos. The mites, though small and seemingly insignificant, played a crucial role in the survival of the mantid colony, maintaining an order that was vital to its existence. Mantid workers were the smallest and least dangerous members of the mantid colony, but their role was nonetheless crucial to the survival of the hive. Their primary responsibility was to care for the growing larvae deep within the hive's labyrinthine chambers. Each worker was linked to a specific brooding chamber, maintaining an almost instinctual awareness of its status, no matter how far away it might be. The moment an intruder breached a brooding chamber, the workers' behavior shifted dramatically. Their movements became rapid and purposeful, as they immediately set out to locate the threat. If any larvae were harmed, the workers would not hesitate to attack with ruthless efficiency, emitting a high-pitched, piercing whine that alerted nearby workers to swarm the intruder. The relentless onslaught of workers would continue until the enemy was eradicated, ensuring that the larvae were kept safe at all costs. Drones made up the vast majority of the mantid population, forming the backbone of their military forces. These four-armed soldiers were formidable in both strength and aggression, armed with powerful blasters that made them a terrifying presence on the battlefield. Drones were primarily used as seek-and-destroy units, often venturing far from the safety of the hive to scout for food supplies or eliminate potential threats. Equipped with advanced jetpacks, drones had the ability to traverse difficult terrain and reach areas that would otherwise be out of their grasp. The jetpacks provided them with unparalleled mobility, enabling quick getaways when necessary, as well as allowing them to execute precise, coordinated ambushes with deadly efficiency. Their adaptability and relentless nature made drones a force to be reckoned with in any engagement. Mantid soldiers were armored behemoths, and by far the most lethal members of the mantid colony. Towering in size, they were not only incredibly fast, but also fiercely dangerous, capable of dispatching even the most formidable opponents with terrifying ease. Their heavy exoskeletons were virtually impenetrable, designed to endure even the most forceful blows, making them nearly indestructible to anyone unlucky enough to cross their path in the wild. Their presence alone instilled fear, as the ground would tremble beneath their massive strides. Those who faced them in battle often found themselves overwhelmed by sheer strength and unrelenting fury. Each mantid soldier was a living weapon, programmed to hunt down and destroy any threat to their colony, and they did so with relentless precision. With the ability to coordinate with one another seamlessly, they struck with deadly force, crushing any hopes of survival for their enemies. The mantid queen, the insectoid leader of the mantid hive, was a towering and terrifying figure of immense power. All mantid warriors served her and her precious embryos with unwavering loyalty, willing to sacrifice everything to ensure her reign and the survival of the colony. This colossal creature, a strange blend of praying mantis and aphid, commanded authority with an almost magnetic presence. Her massive form was a terrifying sight, armed with energy blasters mounted on her raptorial legs, capable of releasing devastating energy blasts or discharging powerful electrical currents that could incinerate or incapacitate foes in an instant. Her upper thorax was equipped with peculiar claws capable of firing plasma projectiles, which could lock onto targets and relentlessly pursue them. Meanwhile, Her abdomen housed spores that exploded on impact, likely designed to scorch vast areas of land, clearing a path for the hive's expansion or destroying any threat that stood in their way. Under the Primogen's promise of new worlds ripe for infestation, the Mantid Queen's priority was the nurturing and protection of her embryos. With Earth marked as the first target for their invasion, she ordered her warriors with cold, calculated precision, ready to invade a new world. Yet, despite the strength of the Mantid swarm, it was the actions of the Turok known as the Coyote Knight that ultimately sealed their doom. His relentless assault led to the complete extinction of the Mantid warriors, leaving behind only the vast and eerie remnants of their once great hive, a chilling monument to their fall. The Flesh Eaters were a grisly military collective that terrorized the Lost Land for centuries. In the days before the birth of the Turok lineage, the Flesh Eaters swarmed over the Lost Land like an evil cloud of locusts, destroying entire cities and slaughtering whole nations. Their assaults struck such terror into the people of the Lost Land that entire cities were known to have been abandoned out of fear that the Flesh Eater army was approaching. Though it did no direct harm to them, the Flesh Eaters abhorred sunlight, preferring to attack in the dead of night when their prey was blind and most vulnerable. These nighttime assaults added to the hysteria associated with the Flesh Eaters and made the legends surrounding this evil race all the more terrifying. When the line of Turok was born, the Flesh Eaters suddenly found themselves facing a new enemy. Over the centuries, the Flesh Eaters and the Turok lineage battled thousands of times. When the mighty Talset took the mantle, he vowed to wipe out the Flesh Eaters and purge the lost land of their memory. Talset rallied the once cowering human tribes and waged a series of brutal and devastating campaigns against the Flesh Eater army. In a bold and cunning series of maneuvers, Talset and his army attacked the Flesh Eater forces at their own base camps. The most daring aspect of the assault was that Talset's forces struck in the dead of night. The Flesh Eaters never anticipated such attacks and were taken so completely off guard that the bulk of their ranks were cut down before they had a chance to arm themselves. The ensuing battle saw half of Talset's forces killed and the Flesh Eaters utterly decimated. Talset and his army believed they had wiped the Flesh Eaters from the face of the Lost Land. Unfortunately, this was not true. Though nearly exterminated, a small remnant escaped fleeing to the north. They crossed the Death Marshes and took refuge beneath the treacherous Arasian mountains. During their exodus through the Death Marshes, they formed an uneasy alliance with the Perlin. The Perlin admired the fine blades and excellent armor worn by the Flesh Eaters and routinely supplied them with human victims in exchange for weapons and armor. In the nearly 200 years since their humiliation at the hands of Talset, the Flesh Eaters built a terrifying fortress beneath the mountain range. There, they rebuilt their army as they waited for the day they would end the Turok lineage forever and wipe the human race from the face of the Lost Land. Sentinels were the foot soldiers, the grunts, of the Flesh Eater society. Despite their low status among their kind, they were the ones responsible for the majority of the death and destruction that followed in the wake of the Flesh Eaters. Their role was crucial, as they carried out the violent will of their race with unrelenting efficiency. Competition within the ranks of the Sentinels was brutal and unforgiving. Only the strongest and most brutal survived long enough to prove their worth in battle. Those who managed to distinguish themselves in combat were granted the honor of partaking in the blood of the Mother, a sacred and transformative ritual. This rite not only marked their promotion, but also their physical and spiritual evolution, elevating them to the esteemed rank of the Death Guard, the next highest order in Flesh Eater society, armed with massive blades that ran the length of their lower arms and equipped with deadly plasma grenades. Sentinels were ruthless warriors who never hesitated to unleash their devastating firepower in battle. Their ferocity and bloodlust made them formidable opponents, feared even by their own kind. The Death Guard were the pinnacle of the Flesh Eater army. an elite force feared across the Lost Land. Having consumed the sacred blood of the Mother, they were far larger, stronger, and more formidable than the Sentinels, their previous brethren. Though their numbers were fewer, their sheer size, strength, and unmatched ferocity made them far more dangerous and deadly on the battlefield. Clad in heavy armor forged deep within the heart of their mountain stronghold, the Death Guard were nearly unstoppable. Their armor, a testament to the mastery of flesh-eater blacksmiths, was designed to endure the harshest of assaults. Armed with powerful blasters, the Death Guard could strike with surprising precision, mowing down enemies from a distance with deadly accuracy. Furthermore, they possessed a terrifying ability to transmute plasma grenades directly from their mouths through mysterious and arcane methods, turning them into walking weapons of destruction. These towering warriors were the embodiment of the flesh-eater race's wrath, carrying out their will with relentless efficiency and a thirst for blood that could never be quenched. Feared even by the most brutal and hardened members of the Death Guard, the Lords of the Flesh held the highest and most revered honor within the flesh-eater society. These monstrous beings had undergone the secretive and sacred rite known as the Flesh of the Mother, a grueling and terrifying ritual that marked the pinnacle of their transformation. The passage from Death Guard to Lord of the Flesh was an arduous and dangerous process, with only 1 out of every 4 initiates surviving the rite. For those who failed, the consequences were unfathomably eldritch, a fate so horrific it was spoken of only in hushed whispers. Only the most powerful and unyielding warriors were able to endure and succeed in the transformation, for refusal to attempt the ritual meant certain death at the hands of their fellow flesh-eaters. Those who succeeded in becoming Lords of the Flesh were bestowed with far superior armor, forged through rituals unknown to most. This new armor, along with their incredible physical strength, made them even more deadly in battle. They wielded dual energy blasters capable of unleashing devastating firepower, and could materialize homing blades and plasma grenades with their arcane knowledge. The Lords of the Flesh were an unstoppable force, elite beings who embodied both the might and terror of the flesh-eater race. A massive, cancerous monstrosity, the Flesh Mother was the dark and revered deity of the flesh-eater race. This cyclopean abomination embodied suffering itself in the eyes of those unfortunate enough to encounter her. Her very presence struck terror into the hearts of all who gazed upon her, for she was not just a monster, but the living essence of agony. Beings captured by the flesh-eater warriors were offered as sacrifices to this grotesque being. Her den, stained with the blood of countless victims, bore witness to the horrors she feasted upon. Yet even this grotesque scene paled in comparison to the true horror of her nature. Shrouded in dark mystery, the Flesh Mother presided over arcane rites of passage that shaped her children into vicious, unrelenting warriors. The blood of the Mother and the flesh of the Mother were brutal trials that tested their strength, mental resolve, and unwavering determination. Those who survived these grueling rituals underwent horrifying physical and mental transformations, becoming even deadlier and more ferocious engines of destruction. Failure to pass these rituals meant execution, an unforgivable sign of weakness, and a failure to honor the sacred bond with their deity. The Flesh-Eaters had once captured the Turok known as the Coyote Knight during his mission to stop the Primogen. After a brutal clash, the Flesh Mother made the unexpected decision to spare him, choosing to retreat into the shadows and live for another day. Her motivations for letting him go remain a mystery, as does her whereabouts after this event. What drove her to make such a choice, and where she disappeared to, has remained unanswered, leaving her fate uncertain. The formidable backbone of the Primogen's defense system, the Primogen biobots, were a horrifying fusion of living tissue and cutting-edge electronics. These grotesque creations combined the organic and mechanical in a nightmarish blend, making them a terrifying force in the Lost Land. Their unnerving appearance was only matched by their lethal efficiency, as the biobots were programmed for one purpose: to annihilate any threat to their master. The twisted genius of the Primer Gen went even further, embedding a sinister failsafe into their design. With a brutal berserk programming embedded deep within, these living machines could be triggered into a mindless, frenzied rampage. Once activated, they became uncontrollable, driven solely by the command to destroy everything in their path. The once precise, calculating nature of these biobots would be replaced by pure chaos as they tore through anything that moved, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. In this horrific state, they would have been an unstoppable force, an embodiment of the Primer Gen's wrath. The Primer Gen Trooper stood as a terrifying humanoid abomination, a grotesque fusion of metal and flesh. It was nearly impossible to discern what kind of creature it might have been before its transformation, as the body was a patchwork of mutilated organic parts and cold, unyielding machinery. These creatures were not only unnerving in appearance, but also formidable in combat, heavily armed and highly efficient in their duties. Equipped with powerful laser pistols, the troopers were a constant presence in the labyrinthine hallways of the Primer Gen's massive lightship. Their enhanced senses, finely tuned to detect even the slightest disturbances, made them exceptional hunters. They would relentlessly patrol the superstructure, hunting down any intruders with cold precision. Once an intruder was detected, the Primer Gen troopers would close in, their weapons ready and their movements calculated, ensuring that no one would escape the wrath of their relentless pursuit. A bizarre and unsettling fusion of metal and something vaguely arachnid, the biobots were strange creations that roamed the corridors of the lightship with eerie precision. Instead of legs, these creatures sported large wheel-like appendages that allowed them to move swiftly across the vast expanse of the ship. Despite this unconventional form of locomotion, they propelled themselves with their strong, mechanical arms at remarkable speeds, compensating for the apparent handicap. Their once organic eyes had been entirely replaced by advanced sensors, amplifying their already extraordinary vision. This technological enhancement turned the biobots into formidable snipers, capable of making near-impossible shots with deadly accuracy. When they came to a full stop, they would unleash a powerful scatter cannon that fired explosive rounds with devastating effect. In close combat, their sharp metallic limbs were merciless, capable of shredding targets with brutal efficiency. The biobots were a perfect blend of cold precision and raw destructive power, making them a feared presence within the depths of the Primer Gen's lightship. An enhanced version of the Primer Gen Trooper, the Elite Guard were towering, heavily armored cybernetic titans. These imposing creatures were far more formidable than their predecessors, not only upgraded with reinforced, near-impenetrable armor, but also outfitted with far deadlier weaponry. Their standard laser pistols had been replaced with devastating explosive blasters, capable of causing widespread destruction. Positioned behind their shoulders, dual ion cannons were installed, capable of launching a barrage of projectiles in a wide arc, overwhelming their targets with a relentless saturation attack. For added defense, the Elite Guard were equipped with an advanced camouflage unit, allowing them to temporarily vanish from sight and approach their enemies undetected. This gave them the element of surprise, enabling them to strike swiftly before their opponents could mount any defense or retaliation. Due to the immense resources and time required to create these elite troops, the Primer Gen deployed the Elite Guard sparingly, reserving them only for the most critical sectors of his vast lightship. They were a symbol of his power, a nearly unstoppable force meant to defend the heart of his domain at all costs. A terrifying cybernetic creation, the Primer Gen drone was a sleek flying nightmare meant to soar through the air with eerie precision. Designed as cutting-edge reconnaissance units, these drones were originally meant to be deployed in small groups of 4. Their primary purpose had been to scout ahead when the Primer Gen reached his original destination, gathering vital information. As a result, they were completely unarmed, relying solely on their advanced surveillance capabilities. For most of their existence, these drones remained grounded within the lightship's hangars, only called upon by the Primer Gen in the heat of battle. During his battle with the Turok, known as Joshua Fireseed, the Coyote Knight, they were unleashed as a tactical distraction, a desperate attempt to stall for time as the Primer Gen scrambled to eliminate the warrior. Their lack of weaponry made them little more than temporary nuisances, but their speed and agility served to momentarily hinder Turok's relentless assault. A scant billion years after the birth of a universe older than our own, one of the earliest races of intelligent beings forged great lightships in an effort to discover the answers to the mysteries of their existence. The most daring and brilliant of these beings was not satisfied with studying bits of shell after the hatching of the cosmic egg. He yearned to behold the hand of God, to witness the dawn of time. This being used his chronotron particle research to modify his lightship for a journey to the great beginning. But his hubris paled before the awe and danger of traveling across the very first event horizon. At the height of the momentous journey, the lightship's power core breached. Its escaping energy made contact with the primordial elements of the cosmos and created an explosion that hurled this being and his lightship into the maw of infinity. This being was sentenced to an eternal slumber by his own making and lay dormant for billions of years outside reality, while the lightship hurtled about, gathering bits and pieces of various points in time, thanks to temporal disturbances, like a snowball downhill. This flotsam and jetsam coalesces around the lightship, weaving itself into a vast, twisted world, the lost land of Galliana, which continues to hurtle across time, existing in all times at once, separated from our reality by the netherscape void. This being's eternal slumber, however, was unexpectedly interrupted. After successfully stopping the evil warlord known as the Campaigner, the Turok known as Talset set out to rid the universe of an artifact known as the Chronoscepter, an artifact originally derived from parts of the same lightship that gave birth to the Lost Land. The destruction of this artifact created an enormous time quake that shocked the very core and foundation of the Lost Land, and in turn, it awoke the lightship's master, the Primer Gen. Though physically trapped within the lightship, the Primer Gen had scoured the Lost Land for centuries with the power of his mind, searching for those that would serve him. Through the ages, he touched the minds of millions, tirelessly searching for those with the necessary strength of body and weakness of mind to suit his purpose. Had the Primer Gen succeeded in escaping his imprisonment, reality would have ceased to exist. Time and space would have lost meaning altogether, and the fate of the Primer Gen would have been left in question. For his sole reason to escape his imprisonment was his yearning to return to a time and universe that no longer existed. Thank you for watching until the end.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel, comment, and share the video.
Don't forget to leave a like. It all helps.
See you in the next one.